Where do prejudiced ideas come from? It might start as simply as what you're used to. The group you identify with, your in-group, whether a particular generation or gender or racial or ethnic group, create your sense of what's normal and right. Ethnocentrism may leave you feeling those outside that group are strange, inferior, or even evil. And then those ideas get passed on to other people. They become part of our cultural socialization. But most people have been exposed to prejudiced values, yet in many ways our culture now views such ideas as deviant. So why do some still seem so prejudiced? Psychologists point to certain authoritarian personality traits that go along with an especially prejudiced worldview, associated with lack of education or harsh parenting. They point out that those who are prejudiced against one group are often prejudiced against many groups, displaying racism, sexism, homophobia, and generally assuming that it's a dog-eat-dog world and that they know what's right. But even if it's just a few bad apples, their discrimination is enough to cause major disadvantage, especially if they're in a position of power and others stand by without speaking up. And while individuals might question group stereotypes, they may also see enough examples of stereotypes being fulfilled to reinforce prejudice. There are likely to be plenty of examples that don't fulfill stereotypes, but they may lose out to confirmation bias, especially if both individuals on social media and the gatekeepers to mass media overgeneralize stereotypes through selection bias. These unfair displays may be intentional, either attempts by those authoritarian personalities to get others to conform to their beliefs, or by those seeking power to gain support by providing a scapegoat for larger social problems such as crime or unemployment. Scapegoat theory says that while it's difficult to understand or fix dysfunctional institutions such as families, schools, the criminal justice system, or the economy, it's easy to blame specific groups such as young people or immigrants. Lastly, prejudiced beliefs may continue because of the vicious cycle of discrimination that they create. One group sees another as a problem, so segregates and discriminates against them, causing long-term disadvantages for that group, and that then provides useful confirmations of the initial prejudice. Discrimination isn't always obvious. The first level of discrimination is simple words and images, symbolic representations of a specific group's stereotypes. It may begin by simply telling a story in which you label a person by their group status, age, gender, race, etc. Since stories of deviant behavior are more likely to be told, they may reinforce negative ideas about that group. Then, with those ideas subtly affecting your generalized other image of that group, you may discriminate in your casual behavior, influencing informal norms. Once you start treating those of a certain age or gender or racial group differently, more obvious discrimination may take place, perhaps even changing formal norms and expected social roles in the larger culture. Hate crimes, from harassment to genocide, often are a reaction to people deviating from the social norms other groups expect of them. The murder of 14-year-old Emmett Till that helped kick off the civil rights movement was in reaction to accusations that he had spoken to a white woman in a way seen as deviant for a black man. The idea that young people are troublemakers may lead to discrimination against them in jobs and activities, leaving young people lacking in opportunities for money and entertainment. If even a few react to the strain with deviant behavior, it may be enough to reinforce those stereotypes. But prejudice isn't always obvious or even intended to be negative. Any overgeneralized belief about people can affect their prestige in the social roles allowed for them. Many older people in the USA find themselves exiled from a popular culture that values a youthful standard of beauty and sees sexuality as a norm of the young. Thus, the many products on the market to make you seem younger, and the stigma associated with a low sex drive at any age. Older people, women especially, as we'll see in the next lesson, may feel that the only way to achieve social mobility and prestige is to put on a mask of youth, and the only way to behave freely is to deviate from so-called appropriate behavior. There are many excuses given for prejudice. If assumed stereotypes are based on biology, such as age's effect on the body and brain, or genetic differences between sexes and racial groups, then social mobility is closed to anything but a biological change, such as drugs, hormones, or a claim of mixed heritage. But more common today is the excuse that groups are different culturally. This kind of prejudice may point to some real cultural norms, but overgeneralizes and is often based on ignorance and ethnocentrism. In this case, social mobility may be open as long as individuals assimilate to your own norms, leading to common defenses of discrimination such as, I don't have a problem with kids as long as they act mature, or I'm not racist, I just don't like people who act ghetto or redneck. The most difficult excuse for prejudice to overcome is situational, because it often affects those who are aware of the disadvantages caused by discrimination. You may not think that there's anything biologically or culturally different about someone, but if you see them as part of a group that has historically lacked education and opportunity, you may still treat them differently, thus ignoring individual differences and continuing discrimination. In this case, social mobility may be seen as only possible if a more privileged group takes control. When we think of discrimination, we often use our micro-perspective. A prejudiced individual might discriminate openly, or they might keep their beliefs backstage to such an extent that they don't realize that they have them. Even if the first levels of discrimination come out, reactions to them may cause defensiveness or also be kept hidden, thus never affect their looking-glass self-image. But discrimination can be far more damaging when it happens at the institutional level, or in the societal system as a whole, so it's crucial to understand the macro perspective. Institutional discrimination is a disadvantage caused by formal organizations or whole institutions, not by any one individual, but as a result of formal norms and operations. Businesses may require retirement by a certain age, pushing out older people. If young people become a scapegoat for crime, then the criminal justice system may unfairly target them or deny them rights. Youth certainly lack political power. Not only are lawmakers significantly older than the average age of the population, the formal norms of our Constitution forbid anyone under 35 from becoming president. A 17-year-old may be far more politically informed than a 30-year-old, but only the latter has the right to vote. Of course, individual prejudice may limit the mobility of those deemed too old for political office as well. Discrimination may prevent older Americans from finding other kinds of employment, despite the presence of many older people in the workforce. Institutional actions can also help prevent discrimination, such as the Age Discrimination Act, which makes it illegal to discriminate based on age. Yet, prejudice based on biological assumptions about the abilities of older people continues to cause discrimination. This is part of a larger problem of ableism, prejudice and discrimination against those labeled less able to carry out so-called normal tasks. You probably know that the Nazis committed genocide against the Jewish, Roma, and other ethnic minorities. But did you know that they also murdered drug addicts, the mentally ill, and others labeled disabled? Lower levels of discrimination are based on a stigma of helplessness, the idea that a person with physical or mental differences is incapable, and therefore pitiable and difficult to include in social activities. This is related to the medicalization of deviance. It assumes that while you may not be a bad person, you are still the cause of your own disadvantages. Prejudiced beliefs and discriminatory action don't necessarily go together. While a prejudiced person may hide their beliefs by not acting out discrimination, a person who is not personally prejudiced may still discriminate based on assumptions about other people's beliefs. Or they may discriminate simply because of the status quo or the way things are right now. Institutional discrimination as well can happen simply because they are set up for the dominant group. Without any particular prejudice against disabled people, if a building or operation requires walking upstairs or seeing and hearing instructions, an otherwise capable person may be unable to participate. Those who defend the way things are as either just or unavoidable are often those who have benefited the most from the current system. Imagine if you were nearsighted or had hay fever, but the people around you simply shrugged their shoulders and said, "Well, too bad you can't see clearly," and spend your summers in bed with a box of tissues. Thus, a new way of looking at ability may be necessary. The idea that it is not the person causing the problem, but the social and physical structures built around them. Luckily for all of us, the structures of our society can change, and with them, the status quo. Just as we've made glasses and allergy medicines available, simple differences in the way society operates can open up social mobility to those previously kept down. From wheelchairs and sign language to new sports and changing representations of beauty, discrimination and disadvantage can be reduced and perhaps even eliminated entirely.